and figure out who I was after all of these changes, because, you know, I'd been through change after change, and also a lot of what I'd gone through when I was younger, and I hadn't realised this at the time, but it had made me very much a kind of people pleaser throughout my 20s. And I realised that in actual fact that I'd lived my entire 20s bending and flexing to be the perfect friend and the, you know, the fun girl and this girl
whoever
and that
people
girl
wanted you to be at that time.
And my partner to, you know, previous boyfriends, you know, it would have been like, I don't know, like my ex-husband, I was probably trying to flex to fit into his world, you know, which it shouldn't be. It's crazy, like, isn't it? It should be a combining of two worlds and a perfect combination of those two worlds, you know. But I'd never really got with that program. You know, for me, it was always like, I need to, not impress, that's the wrong word, but I need to fit in.
Let's talk DXB. Real conversations by real people. Carina, we've made it onto Let's Talk DXB.
I know.
Definitely long overdue. I'm so happy to have this conversation, and I can resonate with so much that you do. Obviously, I've been listening to your new podcast as well and watching all you're doing, which is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
And I think you're really working through purpose and helping others as well, because obviously being an identity coach and really supporting people through their own journey and finding who they are, which is such an interesting role. I can only imagine you come across a lot of different things and different experiences.
Yeah.
But as always, I want to get into how you came to being this person and your own journey and struggles and challenges that we all face in life. So let's start a bit more about Carina, your background, your upbringing, and then we'll transition into Dubai.
My childhood was generally quite happy, but then it was quite tricky as well. So my dad left when I was really small, so when I was 3 weeks old.
3
and
weeks?
So I think him and my mum obviously had like a turbulent relationship already.
Yeah.
So he left when I was 3 weeks old, and then so I never met him until much later. I met him for the first time at 16.
Whoa.
Yeah, but I guess so. My mum and I, we it was just the two of us, and it was lovely in so many ways. But my mum was always unwell, unfortunately. So it was quite, what's the word? I guess it was quite an unusual kind of family setup to grow up in. And I say that with a lot of love because I don't want it to sound critical, but it was. Yeah. And, you know, it was in the 80s. So it was kind of like one parent family, only child. I had no brothers and sisters.
Big deal. Yeah, especially in the 80s.
Yeah, like now it's really normal.
Correct.
And but I always felt like the odd one out. And like, because my mum was always unwell, like, I guess I was often looking after her.
I was about to say, who was the carer role? So you went into that carer role as you grew. Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't really have that kind of parent figure throughout my younger years. And she was often in and out of hospital as well. So I was often staying with different people. I'd go and stay with my nan, who I'm still very close to this day. And yeah, I mean, my childhood, I had friends, but then I so I got bullied quite a few times throughout my childhood. Yeah. I always felt like I was an odd child. I don't know if I actually behaved like an odd child, but I definitely felt like I was an odd child. And this is part of what plays into, obviously, why I became an identity coach later. Because these were some of my first former experiences of identity and what kind of led me to have these sort of challenges throughout later life.
Especially what you're naming yourself as well. Like maybe you wasn't odd, but you're telling yourself this as well in some dynamics. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, well, I felt like the narrative was always around me as well, if I think about it. So, you know, it's like, oh, poor Carina, because, you know, her mum's unwell and, you know, but then there was a part of me that was always like, I don't know, I always wanted to be okay. So I was like, I'm fine. I don't need, you know, your kind of pity.
Your pity,
But I guess, so my first experience actually of being bullied was by one of my teachers.
What?
And again, so when I was about, I must have been 5. And so obviously I'd grown up with all of my family who from the East End. Yeah. And I then went into school and I had a very East End Cockney accent, but I was dropping my THs and my Ts and stuff. So I'd say like thought instead of thought, for example.
But that's all part of, I mean, you're learning and that's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
If you're from East London, that's,
Yeah, but I was obviously in Hertfordshire then, and then I had a teacher who basically used to get me to stand up in front of the class and get me to read, and then used to mock me and tell me that I was stupid. So
a teacher?
Yeah. And then my mum found out about it and obviously hit the roof. And then I
of
got
course, you
changed
have to
into a
protect your
different
child.
changed into a different class and all that kind of stuff. But I think, so like now, I think, you know, again, it's one of the earliest memories that I have, probably around challenging my identity and how I couldn't necessarily be myself and be authentic, which is a really big part of what I do now, right?
Literally, it's so important. But it's so interesting because obviously I have a son who's 4 now.
Okay.
But I'm very mindful in terms of like how this younger age can shape, like you remembering that specifically, that can shape confidence, identity, you know, questioning yourself. That can make someone go very inward and become quite shy just from that one thing.
Yeah.
So it's so important for us to kind of realize that and go all the way back.
Yeah.
And think about childhood. You know, therapy, they're always like, tell me about your childhood. And I'm like, why do I need to talk about when I was 4? But it all follows us through, doesn't it?
Yeah. And we don't realise it and we hold on to these things as well. So if you'd asked me about that 10 years ago, I might not have even been able to conjure that. But obviously I've done quite a lot of self-development in latter years. And so I do know that that's there and it's quite a formative memory for me.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right because, you know, our earliest memories are usually around sort of 3 to 5 years old, and a lot of our beliefs are also set up on memories that we have from the ages up until about 7 years old as well. So it's really early.
It's so important to be mindful.
So then what else in terms of my childhood? Oh my gosh, my mum died unfortunately unexpectedly when I was 15.
Well, you were young.
Yeah. And it was
just the 2 of you mainly. You said your grandma, but that's okay.
Yeah. So it was, there were parts, like I say, it's really hard because there were parts of my childhood that were happy, but then there were parts of my childhood that were really, really tough.
Even when you said that hit me. I was like 15, losing your mum is hard.
Yeah. It's and it was really challenging, I think, because the whole family was going through it as well. And I I felt, I don't know. I didn't really know, I guess, how to behave. I was a teenager and I was obviously going through my own stuff anyway.
Correct. Yeah.
I wasn't the nicest of teenagers, I have to say. But I felt like then all of the adults around me were sort of breaking down and I was a bit like, well, what do I do?
What do you do? Yeah. Or do you even have space to grieve or like, do you suppress?
Yeah. So that was tough. And I think it really... Like, I guess after being 15, you know, you're kind of like, you start to think that you're, especially as a girl as well, right? You start to think you're an adult when you're a 15-year-old girl, right? It's like, I got this, I know what I'm
independent.
Doing. Yeah, it's fine. I know what I'm going to do for my career and everything. And so I guess that made me quite a bullish kind of character after that. And I was very determined and sort of, quite headstrong. I think that's where all of that really did come from. I was very independent as a child and then certain things happened to me where I was like, right, okay, things really are sort of in my own hands here and I've just got to go out and
go for it.
Try and do whatever I think is right, which wasn't always the right thing, obviously. But you learn as you go, right? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that was my childhood, really.
So with that childhood then, because obviously you've done a lot of work and unraveling, I can tell, like you're very aware of kind of those situations and how the roles you played maybe from a young age in terms of caring for your mum, how you dealt with the grief or maybe didn't.
Yeah.
Did you find that it kind of hit you at a certain point in your adulthood in terms of it all unraveling or in terms of you thinking, I need to work through stuff?
Yeah, do you know, it probably hit me at various different points, but I didn't allow for that to happen. Yeah, I've been the queen of suppression throughout most of my adult life. In fact, most of my childhood as well, because I would just always, like what I said earlier, right, I'm okay, I'm fine.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with me.
No problem here. So I've kind of always been like that through adulthood. But I guess it really started to unravel when I moved to Dubai. Because I also had a really turbulent year just before I came to Dubai, which has actually drove all of my decision making to
it's always the way,
relocate.
Though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think most people just have that moment, don't they, where they're back home and maybe they've gone through a few changes or a fundamental change, and they think, do you know what, let's just do that one thing that we've always wanted to do.
Go for it.
Yeah.
But I think it also takes a certain person though, because obviously you're quite headstrong and you know what you want to do and you go for it. Because you either have a person like I'm just going to do this. I need a change. It's hard. It's scary. I don't know what I'm doing. Or you have someone that stays in it and they can't think of a way out. Like they just would never think to change the narrative or the situation.
Yeah.
And they kind of just see their time just going in that situation.
Yeah, that's
true. So I think
true.
it does take a certain mindset to at least like have the bravery to pivot, because I think I always say there's a thin line. When I found in my transition, I'm either going to stay super heartbroken and low, and also you have to go through those emotions. I'm a suppressor, so I had to force myself to go through those emotions, but then make the pivot to like, this can't break me, let me build from it, etc. But you might have someone that doesn't even know how to make that pivot, I think. So I think that shows a character thing in you as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes as well it's having a kind of growth mindset, and you can learn to have that as well, right, from certain situations. Because if you experience something that's really challenging, but then you actually walk away thinking, do you know what, it was still challenging and I wouldn't have chosen to go through it that way, but I actually walked away learning a hell of a lot, and this is what I've kind of got to show for it, and this is where I'm going. And sometimes it can take just one experience to demonstrate that to you, and then it starts to lock that growth mindset in place for you as well. So maybe we've both experienced things like that where it's, and at a young age as well, where we then think, do you know what, this is hard, but I'm gonna
and I can do it, or I've done something hard before and I've managed, so I can use that, those skills of how I kind of, my resilience kicks in, or my like, got to get on with it, and whatever you tell yourself. So that's interesting. So you're saying, okay, so Dubai was that like moment of like transition. What happened before you came to Dubai, and what pushed you to?
So a couple of things happened to me in the year before I moved to Dubai. So I split up with my then husband.
Oh gosh, right.
Who I would later come on to divorce.
Oh wow.
And I also got made redundant from my job, which at the time so I was working for a big global organisation, and it was like I'd come out of a career of being in recruitment, which had been a lot of fun, and it had sustained me through my 20s. And I wanted to go in-house and build a much bigger career. And I found that with this organisation, and I felt really fortunate. And I worked in these big global roles. I got loads of exposure. It was fantastic. I did my master's.
No way.
Yeah, because I hadn't been able to study. I didn't go to uni when I was younger because of a lot of stuff that happened to me. So I felt like I really had that close connection with this organisation, and then it got made redundant. And also with my husband as well, like at the time, obviously I think I could see that it wasn't working for a long time, but you never really want that to be the outcome.
The outcome, you think like you're going to grow old, no one ever really prepares, like gets married to get divorced. But I think once you feel it, again, it takes a certain mindset, because someone maybe will stay unhappy for the sake of just staying. Or, we've tried to work through it, it's not working, and then make the changes needed. So it's brave. That's not easy.
Yeah, I think I've always been that person where if there's something hard to do, even if I know it's the hardest decision in the world, I'll still do that.
You do it.
I do it. And it's interesting where that kind of comes from. I think it's different things that, again, I think it's just having that experience of doing it once, and I think, do you know what, you can do it. You can do it again. I'm going to put myself in the situation that I don't necessarily want to, but I sort of do, because I want to come through the other side. And I've always wanted more. I've always wanted better. Not better in a sense of I don't appreciate what I've got, but if I feel like I need to change something because it's not right, then I want to improve the situation, I
love it. Because a lot of people sit on it. I'm one of them. I'll procrastinate in my thoughts.
Oh, really?
And then sometimes I'm like I still know I need to do it, but that journey will take me longer to make that decision. Whereas I feel like sometimes you have to follow your intuition, or like you just know what's right for you. And I think the bravery to just even put yourself in that, because it takes me a long time to land sometimes.
But also I think you learn from the experiences as well, where you haven't listened to your intuition. You have those situations and you think, do you know what, I knew it. Why didn't I listen to myself? Sometimes that can trip you up, because if you're thinking negatively about a situation, then also the outcome can play into that, because obviously I'm an NLP coach, right? So we'll talk about
I'm hearing that coming through.
How things, so your thoughts and your feelings create your actions and your outcomes and things like that. So there is a part of that. You need to look out for things that will trip you up. But I think you do know when something is right and you do know when something is wrong. And so it's important to kind of to follow that. And I think And yeah, I guess, so I decided to make the move to Dubai, and I did it really suddenly as well. Like I literally got made redundant at the end of that year. I'd split up with my husband earlier on in the year, and then I was here in January.
What?
Looking for a new job.
Wow.
And I think because I felt like those situations were sort of in my control, because even though I didn't want to obviously break up with my husband, I could see it wasn't working. We'd tried for a long time, and I was like, no, this isn't working. I'm going to leave now.
Yeah.
Then with the redundancy, you know, I could have stayed in the UK, and I'm sure like they were about to look for different jobs for me.
So
I'm sure they would have found something. There was a lot of work going on, and I was like, no, do you know what? I'm just going to take the plunge. Thank you very much. I'm going to go. And so I packed my bags and I came to Dubai with all these hopes and dreams, and I was like, you know, I felt very much in control.
Yes.
What could
you
possibly
made those
go
decisions
wrong?
in a way. Yeah, got it. Yes.
And like it was, it was the best decision that I could have made, because like I love living in the UAE. What it's afforded me, like I met my now husband
And love
here.
again. Yes.
I've bought a house here,
Love it.
building a business here, and I just love it. Like I wouldn't change it for the world.
Great.
But the first year of relocating and becoming an expat was really challenging. And I think going back to your original question, which is when did it all start to unravel? I think it was taking such a big leap and detaching myself from so much of my normality that I would have built up, and my identity as well, because, you know, I built up my identity in the UK as this career girl. I was, you know, married and
wife,
you know,
like
and,
the titles that come.
and I was a part of certain sets as well, that we would go out in London and do certain things. And so to have all of that all of a sudden called into question, which very much was when I moved here, and it was a real eye-opener for me, that I think that I probably hadn't dealt with, not necessarily even the stuff that had happened over the prior year, but possibly a lot of what had happened to me throughout my entire life. I'd just been on this kind of autopilot of, and I had some therapy for some of the stuff that I dealt with when I was younger, but not to a degree where I'd really properly dealt with things in a constructive way. Working through it, you know. So that's when it really started to unravel, I guess.
But what was that year like? Because that is a lot of like, you know, like sometimes you have in your mind a new place, new environment. I'm just going to start from scratch. But you get haunted with what you didn't kind of offload, I guess.
Yeah.
So kind of what did you need to do? Did you just kind of like make sure, I don't know, therapy, or you just kind of sat with yourself and really worked through your emotions through it?
To be honest, I mean, I probably didn't deal with it in the first year in the best possible way. And it's everything that I've done since then as well. And it was that year that was really an eye-opener for me, because, and I think also as well, when you relocate, you know, you meet a lot of people that would tell you to just throw yourself into everything, right?
Yeah,
and
do it all and say yes to everything.
Everyone I speak to, friends, clients who've relocated, and they're like, they feel this massive pressure to just go out with everyone, be a yes girl, do everything, and you know, and that's not true now when I work with clients. I'm like, no, you need to follow your intuition, and your gut will tell you what's right and what's wrong. And I spent a lot of time in the first year probably trying to throw myself too much into, I don't know, anything really to distract myself.
I was going to say, that's a distraction, isn't
from
it?
what was really going on. And what I actually really needed to do was to spend some time with myself and actually figure out what was going on. And figure out who I was after all of these changes, because, you know, I'd been through change after change, and also a lot of what I'd gone through when I was younger, and I hadn't realised this at the time, but it had made me very much a kind of people pleaser throughout my 20s. And I realised that in actual fact that I'd lived my entire 20s bending and flexing to be the perfect friend and the, you know, the fun girl and this girl,
whoever
and that
people
girl,
wanted you to be at that time.
And my partner to, you know, previous boyfriends, you know, it would have been like, I don't know, like my ex-husband, I was probably trying to flex to fit into his world, you know, which it shouldn't be. It's crazy, like, isn't it? It should be a combining of two worlds and a perfect combination of those two worlds, you know. But I'd never really got with that program. You know, for me, it was always like, I need to, not impress, that's the wrong word, but I need to fit in. that's what I was not obsessed with again, that's the wrong word, but maybe I was actually.
But maybe it's also
the forefront of my mind.
To be accepted or liked, because you go back to your childhood of even that teacher, like, just kind of isolating you, making it seem like the way you speak or who you are is not the proper way. So sometimes you find yourself then molding just to be able to be accepted in certain groups. So that would completely make sense. Yeah. But that's exhausting then, because as an adult then, you finding your identity in Dubai as an adult, that's hard. Because then I'm like, I should know who I am at this age. But you have to unravel and really figure it out.
Do you know, it is hard, but then I also think that it's probably one of the easiest places to find your identity. But if you approach it in the right way, because I don't actually just say this about, relocating to Dubai, but relocating anywhere across the globe. As soon as you leave your home country, there's a tendency to think, I can be whoever I want to be now, reinvent yourself. Yeah. So then you can start to think, I want to be this kind of person. And you see a lot of people
I've seen that
do that in different, and I've travelled and, been to other sort of very typical expat countries, and you see a lot of expats who do that as well, and behave quite differently to how they would have done at home. So I think if you manage it in the right way and you think to yourself, do you know what, this is like me drawing a line in the sand and thinking, yes, I can be anyone I want to be, but how about I be the real me and figure out who that is.
Love it.
And this is a great space to be able to do that, right?
And have the freedom. There's no judgment from friends, because when you're back home, they'll be like, oh, you've changed, or all the voices of like, why? Or you might lose people because they won't understand you for like who you want to be. They just know you for however you've shifted or molded into how they want you to be. So I feel like it's such a clean slate because nobody knows you. And if you lose friends through it here in Dubai, okay, they're new friendship circles. So the voices are, it's easier to navigate.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, actually. It's a good place to be able to say, this is me, take it or leave it type thing.
Yeah. And I think also as well, when you start to act like yourself, then you start to attract the people that you actually want in your life.
Correct.
And you also start to draw up your boundaries as well. Because this is the other thing I realised, I had no boundaries whatsoever. I just wanted to probably be liked and to be seen as someone who was fun and, and, be this career girl and, but things had changed an awful lot for me. So it was like, well, is that actually me?
I love it.
In some ways, yes, it is. But there's actually more to me than that as well. And so, when you start to get to know yourself, then you start to, just bring the right people into your life as well.
So then how did you get into like identity coaching then? Because obviously you've gone through your own journey and probably through that you really knew like this was your passion, this was your purpose and wanting to help others. How did you make that pivot? Because I always ask that, how did you make the pivot from corporate into doing your own thing? Because I think that in itself takes a certain mindset to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different sort of parts of that really. So when I came here, and I was very fortunate to find a corporate job.
Right. Yeah.
And I worked in a couple of corporate jobs, but for different reasons they weren't quite right for me. And when I look back now, I probably had fallen a little bit out of love with working in corporate anyway, because I'd kind of gone through the redundancy and just maybe it had sort of shifted my thinking a little bit more. And I'd always been involved in coaching. Right. And so in the back of my head, I'd always wanted to set up a coaching business.
Got it, yep.
But I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. And I would often have, little snippets of conversations with people. And I'd be like, aspirationally, this is sort of what I want to do. And then, I actually took some time out to then work on that.
Got it.
And this was going into 2019.
Right.
And but I was getting married to my husband in 2019.
Right.
So I had lots of different things going on as well. And I was going backwards and forwards to the UK. And it was a fabulous year. And we'd done quite a lot of travel. We went on a honeymoon, which was about a month long. And so all this kind of fun stuff was going on. Yeah, it was lovely. But I was meant to be trying to figure out what kind of coaching business I wanted to build. And I did a bit of studying here and there, but I wasn't focused enough. And then what actually really focused me was the fact that my husband got made redundant at the end of 2019 and he'd been in his sort of job for life situation as well. So then he went through the same thing as what I'd been through. At that point would have been 6 years before or something like that.
Wow.
and we were about to go into
lockdown and like
which we didn't know.
Why is it always the worst times?
I know.
Life, honestly.
So we both kind of went out into the market, obviously, because we loved Dubai and we knew that we wanted to stay here.
Yeah.
100%. So that was the main aim at that time. And then I was actually the person to find a job, which fortunately I did, because obviously we went into lockdown. Yes. But I think it was really, it was a pivotal moment for me in the sense that I was like, right, okay. Like I was enjoying my job, but at the same time I was thinking, am I really serious about building a business? And so I left my corporate career because I was like, right, I'm going to fuse together styling and coaching. So I was sort of working on the idea for that. And then I was working as a stylist at the same time.
Fantastic.
And I was working with clients who some of them I would work with virtually. So I wouldn't really get to know them. But the people that I would see in person, I would really get to know. And the common ground that every single person had was the fact that they'd gone through some kind of change. And they were talking about their styling in the sense that it had impacted their identity.
Got it.
And I was like, there's a bigger piece here to work with psychologically that I think the styling is great. But first and foremost, you sort of need to uncover who you are. If you feel you've changed and you don't really understand yourself anymore, isn't that a piece of work you need to do before? So all of this kind of come together. And then I started to look back at my own personal story. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's actually so much that I've been through that, has called my identity into question. And I've had to navigate and pivot and then figure out, who is Carina going forwards. And I did that without very much, structure or support in place. So that's where it came from. And then I started to really build it out from there. And I feel like it's been a bit of a journey as well. You look through all of the signposts of life and you think, actually, my career was leading to this point, but so was my personal life as well. And they were just sort of journeying in parallel.
Crazy.
And then they met at this kind of juncture, really. That's how I see it anyway.
That's basically, when you were talking, I was like, it's just so weird how it's all kind of like clicked and come together. But it does in life eventually. It does in life. So what are the tips like for someone that's trying to really find their identity and work on that? Like, what are some of the tips that you would give people as a starting place? They're a bit lost, or they're new in Dubai, or they've been in Dubai for a while, and there's been a life change. But where do they start with this? How can they unravel some of it?
I think first of all, it's about being honest with yourself and understanding that, maybe there is a requirement to kind of do some introspective work. Because I think for me, for a very, very long time, that was the bit that I was struggling with. And also when I see my clients now, so coaching relationships only ever going to work if somebody truly is at that point where they say, do you know what? I've realised that there's something going on. I need some external support. If you work with a client that's not at that point, then it's not going to work, So I think first of all, it's actually getting to that point and being really honest with yourself and thinking, is there a level of work? And there's no shame in asking for support. And it's actually way better that, if there is something going on, that you sit with it, you explore it. You think about whatever support you need in order to be able to get through it. So definitely that would be my first piece of advice. I think second pointer as well is just trying to get to know yourself. And as part of that as well, if you have been through some kind of change, don't be critical of yourself because I see so many people in this kind of situation where, like I see it with mothers quite a lot as well. I want to get back to being that person. But you're not that person. You're that person, but improved. Because you've learned all of these additional resources. You've gone through this wonderful experience and you're now a mother. And so like you are that person still and you carry that person with you. But that person has changed, but there's so much more that you now have. So don't be critical about the fact that you're not still in that place, because that place is no longer right for you. You're still that person. You've still got all of those qualities, all of those skills, all of that personality, but you've got more in addition to that as well.
I think for mothers, because obviously I was a mother, and I remember when I first had Zayn, and anytime I went to the doctors, they're like, mother of Zayn. I'm like, my name is Sharon. It just used to, because I felt like, oh my gosh, like Sharon is gone. And I'm just this mother, like mother of Zayn. I'm like, my name is Sharon. And it was everywhere. And it just used to just drive me insane. But I think what I had to accept is motherhood, obviously, and just embracing that I'm a mother. Maybe deep down I felt overwhelmed, and it was just like a trigger to me. But then now I'm fully loving it, because the skills that you get from it and the learning and being able to intentionally parent Zayn and learn about how to raise him to be a balanced and hopefully a man that really, you know, helps society. That I've been able to embrace, but it takes some time, because people definitely feel like they lose themselves when they become a mother, because you have to be selfless. There is a part of you where you can't do what you want. You can't just get up and go anymore in the same way. And there's seasons, like the beginning, but now obviously I'm balancing, and I'm still having a part of me and enjoying me as well as all the other titles. So it's a good point.
So true. And it is really challenging as well, because like you say, suddenly you've got this as sort of additional demand placed upon you, you know, as much as you love it, it is exactly that. So, but it's about what you said, you know, you still are that person, and you also still need to allow for that person as well. So,
and not having guilt around it. I think that's important. For me, like, I'm definitely tapping into my talents and purpose. And sometimes that takes me away from not being able to do every bedtime. But then also I know I'm building for me and for Zayn, and also building myself. So I think you also have to program yourself around the guilt of taking time out, because mothers, we definitely can do that.
It's so true. I think it's about getting in touch with your values. And I feel like, because that plays a part in what you've just said about being a mother as well. And I think also people underestimate that your values actually change in life, your priorities change in life.
So
and
true.
if you're uncomfortable in a situation that you're in, it could be because your priorities have shifted and your values have shifted. So again, we're using motherhood quite a lot here, but you know, if you return to work, your priority is probably not going to be your work. You still love it. You're going back to work for X, Y, and Z reasons, but it's not necessarily going to be your priority because your values have fundamentally changed. And it's important to be aware of that, because these are the things that, you know, they, like I say, they set your priorities, but they add value in terms of how you're going to conduct yourself in the workplace and, you know, how you're going to be the best mum that you can be, and also set your boundaries as well. What do you need from the workplace now, you know? So, there's a lot to be said of just sitting with that and analysing that, and and I think journaling as well. If you need to get to know yourself, then it's just,
I started, because at first I used to hear about it. I'm like, what's that going to do? And I gave it a try. And I was like, do you know how light I felt? Just like scruffy handwriting, but literally just putting it all down. And just last week I went back to it, you know, the very beginning, which obviously that season was quite different to now. Like it was quite heavy. It was quite emotional. It was heartache. And then now it's like, oh, you know, I feel like I'm finally shining and glowing and, you know, working through purpose. But it's just interesting to do that. I underestimated the power of journaling. It's beautiful.
It's so good. It's so good for your mindset, because otherwise you're walking around with all of these emotions, all of these trapped thoughts, and sometimes you just need to get them down on paper. And it's a release. And I know some people don't think of that, because I think some people think that it's a journal and you need to pick it up and read it. You don't ever have to read it again. I mean, you might want to upon reflection. So
like
for example, what you
just
what you just did, and it's like you can look back and then go, oh gosh, you know, think of how life has changed and how much I've grown and all that kind of stuff. And so it's brilliant for that. But if you don't want to do that, it's just
a space to
get
just
your
dump.
thoughts out and just put it down, and you don't have to even look at it again. So
you've definitely helped me. I'm like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I love it. It's so important, because I think what I've learned through this, like the divorce was a trigger for me for sure, and all the labels that came with, because I loved being a wife. You know, I love the unity of marriage and family. So I had to like grieve that a lot. And then obviously the whole single mum title, like I was dealing with a lot of shame that I had built up, so I needed to work through that as well. But I think also, who is Sharon? And like fully, because I used to be quite a, you know, accommodating personality, and that's through childhood. I was always the one to like do as I'm told, get on with it. My parents want me to do this, and I would do that as well. And now I feel like I'm like rebelling, being a 16-year-old, because my therapist was like, you just seem so light and free, and you're really working through and vocalizing, using your voice, you know, like this is a talent that you've had that maybe you've suppressed for so long. And just living in authenticity, you know, being who you want to be. And it's the best feeling ever. It's the best feeling.
It really is. And
it's
also, like, so the thing that I always say to my clients as well is, when you can really discover who you are, then everything else starts to make sense, because you build that level of confidence. And obviously, you know, there's work that I would do with a client in terms of building confidence. But naturally, you start to have that level of assertiveness, and you want to take that out to the world, and you want to be, you know, unquestionably you, and you want to start to think, okay, now I have a clear idea of the goals that I actually really want to build, and this is how I want to, you know, map out the next moves, or, you know, design and create the life that I actually really want. And so it gives you all of that.
You feel very empowered and not shy. Well, I love what you're doing, because obviously you're helping people, and I think when you can do that as well, it's such a blessing, and more blessings come to you as well, because you're helping people fully live in purpose and find who they are.
Yeah,
so it's fantastic.
And
I'm tuning into your podcast on my drive this morning. I was listening to the latest episode, so it's great conversation. So well done for starting that.
Yeah, I think it's really important, because with that, I said to you before, right, I'd always wanted to do a podcast. I think because I'd interviewed a lot throughout my corporate career, and I was like, this definitely has to be something that I put on a business plan before I actually even properly had a business going. And but I was like, when I sort of worked out the whole personal identity coaching piece, immediately I was like, brilliant, now I can get people on who've gone through all of these different changes, and like, you know, some of them we elect to do. So a lot like what I was talking about, you know, I chose to, you know, take some of the changes that I did, and then I chose to relocate overseas when I did. But still it's challenging, and still it threw my identity into question. But I came through the other side, and, you know, then there are other stories that, you know, I've showcased, and it's not amazing. Through their own choice, but it's how they deal with that, and how they move through that, and you know what they gain from it. It's just incredible.
That's exactly it, because that's the learning as well. You know, when I did my first episode, Divorce in Dubai, I think when I was like, okay, these conversations need to be more open and constructive, because I felt very alone. I was like, I'm the only divorced person in Dubai, which is obviously not the case, but because obviously it wasn't a circle that I knew that well. I maybe had one friend, but then you isolate yourself, because you give yourself all these labels and the shame around it. But when I openly had those conversations, the amount of people like, you've released me from my shame, or, you know, I'm not alone. And in a weird way, it's quite normal, you know. Some marriages do break down, unfortunately. It doesn't work out, but how do I come out that other side? So conversations are so important. Storytelling and sharing and authenticity. I'm here for it.
Well, clearly because of your podcast, right? Which is doing amazingly as well.
It's growing.
So.
It's growing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I could be here forever. Even before
the
cameras came on, we were like, but I love this. I'm glad we finally got it together.
Me
such
too.
a beneficial conversation. So thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
It's been so nice.
Let's talk DXB. Real conversations by real people.